So we're recording now. Uh, like I said before, this is the final webinar of the climate change campaign that the BPSA has been running. And it's a wrap-up webinar, basically to say what you can do on campus to support climate change campaigns as a pharmacy student and in your personal life. And also what we, the BPSA exec, have been doing to support climate change campaign. So yeah, we will get started now, and then so I will present this PowerPoint, and then afterwards we'll open the floor up to any questions and discussions. Yeah, so this is our climate change on campus webinar. So our first point is how you can campaign as a pharmacy student. So what you can do to help is share reliable resources and tips on social media and with your friends and family. You could also join sustainability teams at your university campus that go around picking up litter and planting trees. I know that on my campus, they have a few sustainability teams that do that, and I've joined them once for litter picking, and it's a great way to socialize whilst also making a difference on campus. When you do assessments and finish modules, typically schools of pharmacy tend to ask for feedback. And so if you think that sustainability topics could be relevant in a certain module, it'd be great if you mention that in your feedback to your school of pharmacy so they can seek to put it as part of your curriculum. You can also campaign with your university's environmental groups. And also if you're working in a pharmacy, or even in your school of pharmacy building, if you see there aren't many recycling bins, you can always request to have a recycling bin put in. You can also make changes to your personal life. So we as the exec have tried to do this, but these are some ways that you can do it as well in your personal lives. So you can reduce your meat consumption, for example, participating in Meatless Mondays, which doesn't mean to completely cut out meat, but it just means like reducing it. So maybe having 1 or 2 meatless meals in a week. You can also wear more layers instead of raising your heating temperature or putting on your heater. It's a great way to keep yourself warm without wasting any extra energy. You can also go completely vegan or vegetarian, so that's completely taking away meat out of your diet. Shop at zero waste refillery stores. So these are shops where you can go and actually fill up containers that you had previously with things like household items and groceries, rather than collecting more packaging, such as plastic, which is just wasteful or can be wasteful. You can walk, cycle, or take public transport instead of driving. So maybe walking to campus or cycling to campus. And it doesn't mean you can't take like motor vehicles, but maybe taking the bus instead of taking a car, because it's still less harm on the environment. You can shop for secondhand clothing and items instead of participating in fast fashion, for example. So, shopping at charity shops or thrift shops. A lot of these shops actually have more, I guess you could say, up-to-date or modern clothing, whereas before it could have been usually a bit outdated, the styles. And that's because a lot of people are switching more to shopping at charity shops or thrift shops. So it's a great way to find new, unique items without causing more damage on the environment. You can switch your bank to one that is ethical and doesn't fund the use of fossil fuels. So that's a great way to kind of put your, I guess, use your money to make changes. So if you switch to a bank that doesn't fund things that harm the environment, it can show other banks that this is the stuff they need to do to retain customers. So a lot of people have been switching over already to different ones. You can reuse containers and boxes for storage. So if you order a takeaway, let's say, and they give you a bunch of plastic containers, then you can reuse those containers for storage of other foods that you have. If you make any food, you can use that to store it. Don't leave appliances on when they're not in use. So when you're going out, make sure to switch off all the switches, yeah, and all the lights and stuff, so that you're not wasting any extra energy. And also limit how long you run taps for to reduce water wastage. So I was guilty of that a lot. I would just leave the water running the whole time, especially when I was washing up. But now I try to measure how much water I'm using and use it responsibly. So this is what the BPSA has been doing during the climate change campaign. So some changes the executive have made have been increasing consumption of vegan and vegetarian products. And there's a meal that one of the exec made. I personally went meat-free, so vegan completely. And that's one of the meals I got at Wagamama, which tasted amazing. Shopping at zero waste refillery stores. So one of the exec went shopping at one of the stores I mentioned before. And as you can see, they've got quite a selection of things. Switching to reusable menstrual products. So this is something that I personally found out about at the pharmacy show when I spoke to one of the people at the stands, and they were talking about how much waste actual single-use menstrual products create. And so switching to reusable menstrual products saves so much waste and also so much money. And then used refillable coffee cups instead of buying new ones, and then also walking to work and university. During the BPSA's climate change campaign, we posted on Instagram and Facebook stories Tuesday's tips, which were tips on how to live a more environmentally conscious life. And then also Friday's facts, which posted facts on climate change. And we think that was kind of insightful and a great way to bring attention to the campaign and also give our followers and our members more information about climate change and what they can do to do their own part to prevent it. We also hosted webinar Wednesdays like the one you're at now. And the first one was What is COP26, where we discussed what COP26 is, or at the time was going to be, because this was just before it. And then also discussed what we were planning for this campaign. We also ran a BPSA and Pharmacy Declares webinar last Wednesday, which was a collab, which was great, between us and the organization Pharmacy Declares, which is an environmental group of pharmacists who want to see a change in the pharmaceutical industry and how they tackle climate change issues and sustainability. And that was great and insightful. And also during the campaign, a member of the executive attended the BPSA Climate Change Leaders Debate at COP26 in Glasgow, which was a great way to actually get actively involved in what's happening outside of pharmacy as well. So today, the NHS, which has been running their Greener NHS campaign, they are running a spotlight day, and today is on sustainable pharmacy. So across social media, they're highlighting the fantastic work of pharmacy teams in contributing to a greener NHS. So if you did want to get involved with the campaign they're doing, or just the spotlight day today, a great way would be to post a message of support, maybe say what you're doing to keep your pharmacy or you itself as a pharmacy student sustainable, and also sharing and retweeting the content that NHS England posts on their channels, so at Greener NHS, Primary Care NHS, and Keith Ridge one. I believe these are Twitter accounts. So yeah, this is what we've been doing for the climate change campaign, and what you can do, I guess, to be more sustainable and environmentally conscious on campus. So if there are any questions, then now is the time to mention them.
I think it's just really good, especially just now with COP26 and all the sort of focus on climate change, for us to be doing things on campus.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you not hear me? Oh,
Hello?
hello? No.
Oh, you can hear. Okay, good. It's just me then. Great.
Fab. As long as someone can hear, it's really important that we look at on campus what we can do.
So our first question is, what is one thing each of you have learned, stroke taken away from this campaign? So I don't know if Fraser's talking. I can go first, I don't mind. But yeah. So one thing I have learned is, I guess, the importance of individual actions in the fight against climate change. I used to be someone who thought that, you know, whatever we do, even if I do go vegan, let's say, like, is it really going to actually affect the climate? Like, am I able to make significant changes? But through participating in the climate change campaign and talking more about it to people, I've actually seen like a lot of people be like, oh, I didn't know this, I'll change my ways from then. Or if I've mentioned to my school of pharmacy, oh, there's not a recycling bin in here, maybe we need to get one, they actually seemed really receptive to it. So rather than it just being also what the individual changes you can make as a person, it's also the fact that when you make these changes, other people can see them and you can influence others to make changes as well. And so I think that's the biggest thing I've learned. You can accomplish a lot as a single person. What about you, Fraser?
So very similar to Noni, but it just reminded me, I had forgotten almost, not properly, you can't forget about climate change, but I had forgotten about the impact that we're having. And it made me much more conscious over the past few weeks of when you're throwing things away. And in the pharmacy, we throw a lot of stuff away, all that packaging, and all the return medicines, and it made me much more conscious of the impact we're having. And also, I thought about it when I was doing my meatless Mondays. I thought about just how many meals that I was having with meat and about how it's just subconscious. Like, you're not even noticing how much you're eating and how often. So it really made me think, and even cutting down one day of the week for most people wouldn't make much of an impact, but for someone who eats as much meat as me, we're making a big cut here. The planet will be helped. Um, so definitely on your way to becoming vegan or vegetarian isn't a bad thing. You don't need to just jump straight in. You can slowly, and it's a more of a process. It's just like saving the world and the planet. You've got targets. So even if it is by 2026, you become a vegan, like that's still a goal. Obviously, it'd be quite an odd thing to come up with, but having your own goals in your own life, just as you do in pharmacy and just as you would on the course, having wee sustainable things, maybe starting a refillery shop, going and trying it. And you don't need to do everything. Not everybody can say that they do everything for climate change. So there probably is very few, vegans who also use a refillery shop that recycles everything, that, runs everywhere and doesn't have a car and all these things. You don't need to do everything. You can just do one thing. And that's okay. So that's sort of what I learned.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can hear you now, which is great. But yeah, I completely agree with what you said. Like, it doesn't have to be a drastic change, or you don't have to commit 100%, because that can be a bit overwhelming. But even just making small changes at first make a big difference. So yeah. Next question. Why should pharmacy students care about climate change? So do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I think everyone should care about climate change. I think it's really important for pharmacy students because when you're a pharmacist, and obviously just now when you're working in pharmacy, you will be treating patients, and it's almost going against what you're standing for. So you're trying to treat people who are unwell, but when you're contributing to climate change, you're making more people unwell. So whether it's aggravation of asthma, you're exacerbating conditions because of the carbon emissions and things like that. So you're polluting the air, or whether it's even causing more severe weather events. So we're experiencing things like tornadoes in the southeast of England for the first time ever. Can't even believe that there was a tornado warning. And you're contributing to these things, extra floodings and things like that. So you're impacting patients' lives. Even if it is just heavier rainfall on average, that then means that on certain days, perhaps rivers burst their banks and then people can't get to hospital on time. And that can kill people. People can't get into your pharmacy to get their medicines on time, and it just causes delays the whole way through the system. So if you as a pharmacy student are conscious and maybe don't do all the bad things that you did before and do try to consciously make an effort, then you're helping your patients. And you should also be promoting good behaviors as a pharmacist. So, you wouldn't be smoking a pack of cigarettes in front of, your COPD patients, just like how you really shouldn't be actively damaging the climate, because that should be something you stand for.
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's important that as pharmacy students, we start now rather than waiting until we're pharmacists, because the more you're aware of these issues that are going on within pharmacy that make it not so sustainable and harmful to the environment, the more changes you can make once you graduate and become an actual pharmacist, pre-reg or foundation, yeah, sorry, or qualified. So yeah, like for example, like we said about the recycling bins, now you've heard about it. Maybe when you go to your pharmacy during your foundation year, you will see that they don't have a recycling bin, and you can say, hey, it'd be great if you can get one. And that's kind of how the knock-on effect is. Like you bring these ideologies that you learned during your life as a student into your working life. And I think that's why it's important to start now as pharmacy students and to care now. So the next question we have is, it can sometimes be expensive to make some of the changes highlighted. How can you be more sustainable whilst on a student budget? So I think actually a lot of changes you can make cost nothing at all. They just cost your mindfulness. So for example, turning off your appliances before you leave the house or when you're not using them is something that costs nothing and in fact saves money on electricity bills and all that kind of stuff. And that's a great way to save energy and be sustainable. Um, Other things like eating less meat. There are meat-free alternatives are becoming more popular and therefore less expensive. And so you could find a way to incorporate those into your diet, or vegetables in themselves are quite, I think, cheap in comparison to other things like, I guess, chocolate bars and things like that. So they're a great way to, you know, I guess, a great way to build sustainability into your life as a student. I mean, walking to places or cycling instead of taking the bus also saves you money on transport fees, or instead of driving, it saves you money on petrol fees or congestion charges, especially if you live in areas that do those kind of things. So these actually kind of save you money if you think about it in that way. You don't have to commit to some of the things like, I guess, what could be expensive. I forget now, but you don't have to commit to some of the things that could be expensive. You can just do what's within your limit as well, like we said before. Um, or even like menstrual products that are reusable. Since they're reusable, they are a lot cheaper than if you had to keep buying like 5 packs of pads like every time you had your period once a month, which can be very expensive. So yeah, refilleries can be expensive, that's true. So for those who can't afford to go to refilleries currently as a student, you don't need to go now. But what you can do is reuse the plastic packaging you get. So if you get a plastic bag from a supermarket, then you can reuse that plastic bag, and that kind of will help to reduce the environmental impact. Um, or if you get plastic containers, like we said, you can just reuse them as storage. And yeah, that's a great way to kind of stay sustainable on a student budget. We had a comment. A tip can be to look into food options that contain high amounts of protein, like lentils or chickpeas. It's also very cheap and nutritious. That's very true. And they can also be very filling as well, because I know a lot of people are worried about if they were to go meat free, will they actually be like fulfilled? Will they be full up? So that is a great suggestion. Thank you. Fraser?
So with this on a budget, now I totally can understand this. I sometimes look at the vegan alternatives and different things, and I think, oh God, it's a lot of money and there's no meat in it, which is a terrible attitude to have. And I totally, shouldn't be doing it. I sometimes look and I'm like, oh well, I could have just had the steak. But no, what to do is sometimes we forget that when you aren't eating meat, there is actually everything else. So I mean, you don't need to just eat salads. But what you can do is looking at vegetables, looking at sort of, it's getting much better now that there are prepared meals. You don't need to make everything from scratch. So there are sort of ready meal options that are suitable for vegetarians and vegans. But you can buy products and cook yourself and do it vegan or vegetarian. Obviously that, and there's work involved there, and it isn't going to be an everyday thing. I don't know about you, but I'm not in the kitchen all the time. But it can work on a budget. It just will take a bit of extra work. But I'm sure as pharmacy students, I mean, I'm not good at sticking in a budget, so I mean, I can't say myself that I'll be, crunching the numbers, but I'm sure it's something that we can do together. And the more people doing it, the cheaper the thing is going to become. So these things over time, the sort of, it's terrible to say, but I always think Linda McCartney ranges and sort of vegan and vegetarian products. Now the supermarkets are doing their own brands because it's becoming a more popular thing. It is going to keep getting cheaper. And I think, although it's hard, it's not as difficult as, what life will be like when climate change has happened. I know that sounds awful dramatic, but when, thousands of people are at risk of death, I think you'll think, I could have just made that salad. So it's hard, but I think when we're all doing it together, it's not going to be as challenging. And there's loads of recipes online, and there's loads of people that you can follow that do vegan and vegetarian things. So they'll have tips. You can also, just take that extra time making your shopping list. I think helps to stick on a budget. That's another tip, is to make a shopping list. I don't, and then that means that there is never a budget to be stuck to. I don't ever plan it. So planning ahead and thinking about what you're going to buy before you do it, and maybe thinking about what dinner you're going to make before you go, rather than being inspired by the shop, is what I do. But sticking on a budget is never going to be easy. And I would, argue that it's just as hard when, you're eating meat. I wouldn't say anyone finds a budget easier, and often meat's quite expensive. So hopefully that'll empty a bit of money out your budget.
Yeah, definitely. And someone says, also some meat produces much less CO2 compared to others. So for example, chicken versus lamb, that's very true as well. So being conscious with what meat you're taking in as well, that would be great. We have a question in chat. What do you think pharmacy schools can do to contribute to a greener campus? So I don't know if, okay, I'll start. So one thing they can do is, like we said before, making sure there's, in their pharmacy school, there's, recycling bins everywhere, stuff like that. But also increasing the amount of sustainability topics they have on their actual MPharm curriculum would be great, because not only will it teach pharmacy students, but also it could inspire other courses to include that information as well. Other things that pharmacy schools can do to contribute to a greener campus.
I think making it not just part of the course, but making it part of the sort of I want to say the spirit of pharmacy. So we always are thinking about medicines, and I know obviously that's quite crucial in pharmacy, but making it conscious that we should be thinking about the waste that we're producing, just like how in any, so in a supermarket, they think about the waste as it impacts their profit. Um, we should be thinking about waste not just as a profit problem, but as a environmentally conscious problem. So we should be conscious, and the pharmacy schools should be conscious themselves of their own waste. And I think perhaps if they led the way on this one, I know it puts a lot on them, but if they maybe said that we've gone paperless, obviously during COVID, they did really well. Well, I mean that's maybe they did great because it forced them into going paperless. So a lot of the teaching did occur online because that was all we could do. And, you know, obviously that's helpful for climate change. And it could be something that we see in the future. And that if it didn't have to be printed, you don't need all those printouts, because I don't know about everyone else, but I lost a lot of the loose paperwork, and it didn't put me at any better advantage than if I'd saw it on a screen and I did the questions off it. So I think anything that we can do, especially for calculations, they could definitely be projecting them on a screen, or just putting them online and you could access them on Moodle or whatever your system is, rather than printing them out. For notes, definitely lab manuals and handouts and things like that, I think doesn't always have to be printed out. So just making the small changes, and if it was more something we were mindful of, they don't need to suddenly, turn off all the heating and all the lights out and we sit in the dark and in the cold. But if you just thought about it, like, why do the lights need to be on at night? And if they bit more conscious, or even just if part of the teaching is, not promoting a vegan diet to patients, I think, that's a area that's a bit dangerous, what we sort of promote, but even just saying to the students that it's not as challenging or as negative, just saying that, you can be vegan and vegetarian, it does support the environment and it does encourage, less climate emissions. So sharing of knowledge that we know is to be fact, and sharing that to students through teaching, and making them aware of things like COP26. I know that my uni definitely hasn't said anything about it. As far as I know, they haven't promoted anything to do with climate action. They've not said their goals on, climate, being climate neutral, being like emission neutral kind of things. They've not made any, suggestion of it. There's more impact I've seen from the railways, and they've just put up a few signs saying what they're going to do to be climate neutral. I think maybe making sure that the schools are held accountable when they're not as well. So if they're doing something that fine well is not good for the environment, maybe it sounds dramatic, but calling them on it, and saying maybe, oh well, is that the best idea? Which, isn't an easy thing to do. But I think the pharmacy schools should play a bit more of a role, rather than just doing the teaching. They should be making a pharmacist, which is more than just an expert in medicine. They're an expert in a lot of things.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. So we have another question. What if there are no sustainability or climate change societies at my university? So personally, if there are no university societies or groups you can join, you can always look, I mean, personally in my experience, but you can always look online. And if you type in like sustainability group Nottingham or sustainability group Manchester, there will be groups that pop up on like Facebook, Instagram, and they do things in their communities. Or you can do activism from your own social media account. So rather than committing to a specific group, you could be resharing information and stuff like that. You could also start the group yourself, to be fair. If you are passionate enough about climate change and climate action and sustainability, you could start a group. It doesn't have to be a big one, but something maybe like litter picking or planting trees on campus, stuff like that. So yeah, it's all in your capabilities. Um, and don't feel too pressured to like join every group and be like the like campaigner for everything. It can be quite overwhelming. So if you just find something that you're passionate about and you know you'll enjoy, and then you stick to that, I think that's best, rather than getting too bogged down in like getting involved in everything. So even if you're not in a consistent group, like just doing one campaign for a month is better than maybe doing that all for a week even. So what do you think, Fraser?
So I think it'd be good to see pharmacy societies getting more involved in this. So I was going to talk to my sort of schools in the area about getting what am I trying to say? A climate change sort of officer onto their executives, onto their sort of committees or something like that. I'm just suggesting it to an idea for them so that the students there who are the direct sort of pharmacy society for the students on campus, there's a sort of link to climate change and they can see it um, all the time on campus, and just as it should be just as much of a focus as a treasurer for their committee, because let's face it, they're not the chancellor of the exchequer, they're not managing, you know, millions of pounds, but they've still got a treasurer to look after their finance. Why have they not got a student that looks after their climate impact? So maybe not doing, that person would maybe say, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't send out all these tote bags because tote bags are maybe not as environmentally friendly as we think they are. So things like that, or if it was a plastic tote bag, especially. So something like that would be nice to see, and even just encouraging that. So it might be hard, like if you're, you know, just a member of the society, you've only just joined, and then you're saying, you know, why do we not have a this or that? So I'm hoping that I might be able to suggest that it would be a good idea, and I'm hoping that pharmacy societies across Britain want to join in with that and, you know, get people on their committees. And I'm sure they're all very climate focused themselves, so it shouldn't be too much. That could be a new exciting role. I can't take credit for this idea because I did hear it on, I want to say, a webinar or a talk, maybe at the pharmacy show, about how why do we not have more people. It was the webinar from last week. Oh, I knew Priyanka would know. So it was definitely from Pharmacy Declares. They said that, and I think I actually quoted her with the treasurer idea. But yeah, so that stuck with me. And that why do we not have someone that always focuses on climate change? And it'd be interesting to see at annual conference if there's any, you know, talk of it in the BPSA, adding a position. That'd be a bit exciting. Um, so I think we all always are wanting to do what's best for the climate and for our students. So we'll see. It could be exciting. Um, but definitely in pharmacy societies, I would want to promote that for them, getting people involved with climate change because they are literally on the ground and that's who students are seeing. And then if they're doing it, then why wouldn't the universities do it? Because if students are able to be climate conscious, then really the schools of pharmacy might follow.
Perfectly summed up, Fraser. And finally, the final question is, where can we access all of the tips and advice the BPSA has given over this campaign? So our webinars are going to be uploaded onto YouTube. And Fraser, do you know anything else that will be published?
So we will have all our top tips and things that have come out, but I think what we can do is get them all summed up. They'll all be in the story highlights on our Instagram, so you'll see them all on Instagram, so you can catch up with them. So I've missed a couple of them, I won't lie. So I will catch up on them myself, and I think it'd be nice to maybe even see them in a newsletter or something later in the year, reflecting back on what we've done and things like that. So these things won't disappear. You will see them as story highlights. The webinars you can always catch up on. There might even be publications in the future on what we've done and how maybe pharmacy declares getting on and different things like that. So it's definitely not a shut conversation, although we're closing the sort of campaign and things this week. It's not going to be over. And I think it'll be exciting maybe to see how this carries on and how it goes next mandate as well. So I'm sure the next executive will probably carry this on as a campaign of some sort or in other sort of events and webinars. How else you'll see it? I think you'll see it all around you, is what I would hope.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to the story highlights, there is already a story highlights on Instagram called Greener Pharmacy that has links or on story posts, the posters for the webinars we did, and also Tuesday's tips and Friday's facts. So those are great ways to catch up on what we've been doing over the past few weeks. What else will you see from the BPSA? Well, hopefully now that we've talked about it and we've done a campaign for it, we might actually be able to do more as an organization for sustainability within ourselves. Like we said, maybe introducing an exec member who focuses on this stuff or a team that focuses on this subcommittee, which would be great. We could start maybe approaching pharmacy societies and bring to their attention that it would be good if they could also have a sustainability member on their committees or do more for sustainability. So since this was like the first climate change campaign, it's still kind of in its pilot stage, but hopefully we'll be able to make it even more impactful in the next coming years. If you guys have any suggestions of what they want to see from us, then you can get in touch with us. You can DM us on our social media accounts, or you can email our lovely Secretary General, SecGen Priyanka, at, I think that is secgen@bpsa.co.uk. So SecGen being spelled SECGEN at bpsa.co.uk. You can also email the rest of us who are at today's webinar too. Are you happy with that, Fraser, if for people to email you? Yeah, so that's pennineac@bpsa.co.uk. So pennineac@bpsa.co.uk. Fraser would be northernac@bpsa.co.uk. Right, and then Lillian would be westernac@bpsa.co.uk. So yeah, we're always happy to take suggestions and ways for us to make this campaign and what we're doing for climate change and sustainability even more impactful and more targeted towards pharmacy students. So definitely open for feedback. But thank you for all of those who have joined us on our climate change campaign. We hope to see more being done across pharmacy schools in the UK and to do even more as an organization. So that's all from me. Do you guys want to say anything to wrap up?
Just to say that you can start acting now. It sounds dramatic, but the Act Now campaign, all different things. Just sort of like, pharmacy has, declared obviously, dramatic, because it is a dramatic thing. And I think, just acting and getting, not just thinking about, but acting on things. So you've seen things and you've seen stuff with COP26 and our campaign, and I would say just jump right in. Even if it is just, Meatless Mondays, or you're maybe reusing a bag, anything you can, especially with Christmas coming up. Maybe not wrapping everything, maybe not buying so many gifts that you don't need to, things like that, and just, enjoy yourself, but be climate conscious.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd just add that small changes definitely make a big difference, and we shouldn't be afraid to, do the little that we can, even if we can only make one change. That's a step in the right direction. So, like Faisal was saying, even if that's, going meat free for one day, that counts as something, and that making a difference to the, in the long term. So, just do what you can, and improve it as you go along.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here, and we hope to see you guys again soon.